Hello everyone and welcome. There is a name that almost every person on Earth has heard at least once. A name connected to rockets, astronauts, the moon, and the stars. A name that represents one of the greatest adventures in human history. That name is NASA. NASA has sent humans to the moon. It has launched telescopes that show us galaxies billions of light years away. It has sent robots to explore the surface of Mars. It studies our own planet from space. And right now, it is preparing for missions that could change history all over again. Today, we are going to take a journey through the full story of NASA. Where it began, what it has done, what it is doing now, and where it wants to go next. You can also check the description for 10 useful vocabulary words and some useful expressions from this video. Let's begin. Most people know NASA because of space, but NASA is also about something deeper than rockets and astronauts. It is about curiosity. It is about the human desire to ask questions, to explore the unknown, to go further than anyone has gone before. For thousands of years, humans looked up at the night sky and wondered, what are those lights? How far away are they? Is there anything out there? For most of history, we could only wonder. We could only look and imagine. But in the 20th century, something changed. Science and technology became powerful enough to actually try and answer those questions. And NASA became one of the most important tools humanity ever built to do exactly that. To understand why NASA was created, we need to go back to the 1950s. After the Second World War, the world changed in many ways. Two countries became very powerful, the United States and the Soviet Union. These two countries had very different political systems, and they competed with each other in many areas. This competition became known as the Cold War. One of the most important parts of this competition happened in space. In October 1957, the Soviet Union launched a small satellite called Sputnik into orbit around the Earth. It was the first human-made object ever to orbit our planet. People around the world heard the signal it sent from space, a simple, steady beeping sound. And that sound changed everything. The United States was surprised. The Soviet Union had reached space first. The space race had begun. The United States knew it needed to act quickly. So in 1958, the government created a new organization dedicated entirely to space exploration and aeronautics research. They called it the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. NASA officially began on the 1st of October, 1958. From the very beginning, its mission was clear. Explore space, advance science, and do it for the benefit of all people. In its early years, NASA moved quickly. The pressure of the space race pushed the agency to work fast and think boldly. The first big program was called Project Mercury. This was NASA's first human spaceflight program. The goal was simple but historic. Put an American astronaut in space and bring them home safely. The Mercury program ran from 1958 to 1963. NASA selected 7 astronauts who became famous as the Mercury 7. These were military test pilots, brave men who were willing to sit on top of a rocket and fly into the unknown. On the 5th of May, 1961, astronaut Alan Shepard became the first American in space. His flight lasted only 15 minutes, but it was a huge moment for the United States. America was in the space race, but the Soviet Union was still ahead. In April 1961, just weeks before Shepard's flight, A Soviet cosmonaut named Yuri Gagarin had already become the first human in space. He had even completed a full orbit around the Earth. This pushed the United States to think even bigger. On the 25th of May, 1961, President John F. Kennedy made a famous speech to the American Congress. He said that the United States should set a goal to land a man on the moon and return him safely to Earth before the end of the decade. It was an extraordinary challenge. At that time, NASA had only sent one American into space for 15 minutes. The moon was nearly 400,000 kilometers away, but the goal was set, and NASA began to work toward it. The next step was Project Gemini. This program ran from 1961 to 1966. The Gemini missions were designed to practice the skills needed to reach the moon. Astronauts learned how to work in space for longer periods of time. They practiced walking in space, which is called a spacewalk. They learned how to connect two spacecraft together while in orbit. This was called docking, and it would be essential for a moon mission. Gemini was a bridge, a series of steps between the first short flights of Mercury and the great journey of Apollo. And then came Apollo. Project Apollo is perhaps the most famous chapter in NASA's history. It was designed for one purpose: to land humans on the moon. The program began with tragedy. In January 1967, a fire broke out inside the Apollo 1 capsule during a test on the ground. 3 astronauts were killed. It was a devastating moment. NASA paused, investigated, made changes, and then continued. Over the next 2 years, NASA launched several Apollo missions to practice the steps needed for a moon landing. Each mission taught the agency something new. And then came Apollo 11. On the 16th of July, 1969, the Apollo 11 spacecraft lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. On board were 3 astronauts: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Their destination was the moon. 4 days later, on the 20th of July, the lunar module called Eagle separated from the main spacecraft and began its descent toward the moon's surface. The world held its breath. At exactly 2017 UTC, the Eagle landed. Neil Armstrong spoke the now famous words, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." A few hours later, Neil Armstrong climbed down the ladder and became the first human being to stand on the moon. He said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Buzz Aldrin joined him shortly after. They walked on the moon. They collected rocks. They planted an American flag, and they left a plaque on the surface that read, "Here men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon." July 1969 AD, we came in peace for all mankind. Michael Collins waited in orbit above them, and after more than 21 hours on the surface, Armstrong and Aldrin returned to the spacecraft. They came home safely. The space race was over. NASA had done it. The Apollo program continued after Apollo 11. NASA landed 5 more crews on the moon. 12 human beings in total have walked on the lunar surface. The last to do so were the astronauts of Apollo 17 in December 1972. The moon landings were extraordinary. But NASA did not stop there. In the decades that followed, the agency continued to push the boundaries of exploration. One of the most ambitious missions in NASA's history was Voyager. In 1977, NASA launched 2 spacecraft called Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. These probes were designed to travel beyond our solar system and study the outer planets. As the Voyager spacecraft traveled through space, they sent back incredible images and information. They showed us Jupiter's storms in detail. They revealed the rings of Saturn. They explored Uranus and Neptune. For the first time, humans had a close look at the most distant planets in our solar system. Today, Voyager 1 is the farthest human-made object ever created. It has traveled beyond the edge of our solar system into interstellar space. It is still sending signals back to Earth. It is still talking to us, even from billions of kilometers away. In the 1980s, NASA introduced the Space Shuttle program. The Space Shuttle was a reusable spacecraft. This was a new idea. Instead of throwing away the rocket after one use, the shuttle could fly to space, return to Earth, and fly again. The Space Shuttle flew 135 missions between 1981 and 2011. It carried astronauts and satellites into orbit. It helped build the International Space Station. It launched and later repaired one of the most important telescopes in history. The program also experienced terrible tragedy. In 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart shortly after launch. 7 astronauts were lost. And in 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia broke apart during re-entry. 7 more astronauts were lost. These were painful moments, but NASA continued. It honored those who were lost by continuing the mission. That important telescope was called the Hubble Space Telescope. Hubble was launched in 1990 and is still operating today, more than 30 years later. Hubble is a telescope that orbits above Earth's atmosphere. This means it can see space without the interference of clouds or air. The images it has captured are breathtaking. Images of distant galaxies. Colorful clouds of gas and dust called nebulae where new stars are being born. Exploding stars. Deep fields showing thousands of galaxies in a single image. Hubble has helped scientists calculate the age of the universe. It showed us that the universe is not only expanding, but expanding faster and faster over time. This discovery led to the idea of something called dark energy, a mysterious force that scientists are still trying to understand today. Hubble changed our view of the universe completely. NASA also turned its attention to Mars. The red planet has fascinated scientists for a long time. Is there water on Mars? Could there ever have been life? Over the years, NASA has sent many spacecraft to Mars, orbiters that fly around the planet and study it from above, landers that sit on the surface and measure conditions, and rovers that drive across the Martian surface and analyze rocks and soil. Some of the most famous rovers include Spirit and Opportunity, which landed on Mars in 2004. They were designed to work for 90 days. Opportunity kept working for nearly 15 years. Then came Curiosity, which landed in 2012 and is still operating today. Curiosity has climbed mountains, studied ancient lake beds, and found evidence that Mars once had liquid water and conditions that might have supported simple forms of life. In 2021, a rover called Perseverance landed on Mars. It is the most advanced rover NASA has ever sent. It is collecting rock samples that may one day be brought back to Earth for study. It also carried a small helicopter called Ingenuity. Ingenuity made the first ever powered flight on another planet, a moment of pure wonder. In 2021, NASA launched one of its most powerful scientific tools ever, the James Webb Space Telescope. Webb is much more powerful than Hubble. It observes the universe in infrared light, which allows it to see through clouds of dust and look much further back in time. Webb can observe galaxies that formed just a few 100 million years after the Big Bang. It can study the atmospheres of planets orbiting other stars and look for signs of gases that might suggest the presence of life. The first images from Webb arrived in July 2022. They were extraordinary. Images of galaxies billions of light years away, detailed views of nebulae, information about distant star systems. Webb has already changed what we know about the early universe, and it has many years of observation still ahead of it. If this video is helping you practice your English, and if you enjoy learning about real and interesting topics in simple English, we would love to have you as part of our community. Please subscribe to the channel and keep learning with us. Every video is made with care for learners like you. Thank you so much for being here. Now let's talk about what NASA is doing today. NASA is currently working on one of its most exciting programs in decades. It is called Artemis. The Artemis program has one central goal: return humans to the moon. For the first time since Apollo 17 in 1972, NASA wants to send astronauts back to the lunar surface. But Artemis is about much more than simply repeating what Apollo did. This time, NASA wants to establish a long-term presence at and around the moon. Not just a visit, but a sustained base of operations. One part of this is a space station that will orbit the moon, called the Lunar Gateway. This station will serve as a place for astronauts to live and work while they prepare for missions to the surface. Another important goal of Artemis is inclusion. NASA has committed to sending the first woman and the first person of color to walk on the moon. This is a historic step and a reflection of how the space program has changed and grown over the decades. The first uncrewed Artemis mission, called Artemis I, flew successfully in late 2022. It sent the Orion capsule around the moon and back. The next steps involve crewed missions, with astronauts eventually landing on the moon's south pole, a region scientists believe may contain water ice. Water ice near the moon's south pole is extremely valuable. It could be used to provide drinking water for astronauts. It could also be broken apart into hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen and oxygen can be used as rocket fuel. This means water on the moon could help future spacecraft travel further into space, including to Mars. Mars remains one of NASA's greatest long-term goals. NASA's Moon to Mars program is a plan to use everything learned from returning to the moon as preparation for eventually sending humans to Mars. This is a multi-decade plan. It involves developing new rockets, new spacecraft, new habitats, new life support systems, and new ways of producing food and energy far from Earth. A crewed mission to Mars would be enormously challenging. Mars is, on average, about 225 million kilometers from Earth. A journey to Mars would take approximately 7 months each way. Astronauts would need to carry everything they need with them or be able to produce it on Mars, and communication with Earth would have a delay of up to 20 minutes each way. But NASA and its partners believe this mission is possible, and they are working toward it, step by step. Beyond human exploration, NASA continues to operate a wide range of robotic and scientific missions. It studies the Earth from space, monitoring climate, weather, sea levels, forests, and ice sheets. This information is essential for understanding how our planet is changing and what that means for the future. It studies the sun and the effects of solar activity on Earth and other planets. It explores asteroids and comets, ancient objects that can tell us about the early history of the solar system. It searches for planets around other stars, called exoplanets, and studies whether any of them might be suitable for life. And it continues to push technology forward. New materials, new propulsion systems, new communication tools, new ways of exploring space more efficiently and safely. It is worth stopping for a moment and thinking about what NASA represents beyond the missions themselves. Every time NASA launches a spacecraft, it is doing something profoundly human. It is asking a question. What is out there? How does this work? Can we go there? Can we understand more? These are questions that every child asks when they look up at the night sky. They are questions that have no single answer, only more discoveries and more questions. And that is not a problem. That is the beauty of exploration. NASA has shown that humans are capable of extraordinary things when they work together with patience, intelligence, and courage. The moon landing happened not because it was easy, but because people decided to try something that had never been done before and worked together to make it happen. The scientists, engineers, mathematicians, and astronauts who built NASA's history came from many different backgrounds. Many of them were women whose contributions were not always recognized. Many came from different countries and cultures. NASA, at its best, is a reminder that great things happen when people of different backgrounds share a common goal. Today, NASA works closely with other space agencies around the world: the European Space Agency, the Japanese Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, and many others. Space exploration has become increasingly international because the universe belongs to everyone, and the challenges of exploring it are too large for any one country alone. Private companies are also now part of the story. Companies like SpaceX, Boeing, and others have partnered with NASA to build spacecraft, launch rockets, and eventually carry astronauts. This partnership between government agencies and private companies is creating a new era of space exploration that is more dynamic and more accessible than ever before. So what does the future look like? In the near future, NASA hopes to return astronauts to the moon and begin building a permanent base of operations there. Scientists will study the moon in detail, looking for resources and testing the technologies needed for longer journeys. Further ahead, NASA envisions a crewed mission to Mars, perhaps sometime in the 2030s or 2040s. If and when that happens, it will be the most ambitious human journey in history. Humans traveling to another planet, living there, exploring it, and perhaps one day understanding whether life ever existed there. Even further in the future, the discoveries made by telescopes like Webb may help us understand whether there are other planets out there that could support life, whether we are alone in the universe, whether somewhere in the vast darkness of space there is another world looking back at us and asking the same questions we are asking here. We do not know the answers yet, but NASA will keep looking. Thank you so much for listening today. This was a long journey through a remarkable story, and I hope it was interesting and helpful for your English practice. NASA's story is really the story of human curiosity, of the desire to go further, learn more, and never stop asking why. From its first days in 1958, through the moon landings, the space shuttle, the great telescopes, the Mars rovers, and into the exciting future ahead, NASA has shown that when we dare to explore, we discover not only new places, but new things about ourselves. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share it with a friend who is also learning English. And if there is a topic you would like to see in a future video, please write it in the comments. It could be science, history, nature, technology, space, or anything else that makes you curious. I would love to read your ideas. See you in the next lesson. Keep practicing and have a wonderful day.